Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Guten Abend, alle zusammen. If you don't speak Swiss German, do use the translation because I'll be doing the introduction in Swiss German. Herzlich willkommen.
A very warm welcome to you again back here at the Open Forum. We have an emergency. So, a warm welcome to the Open Forum. Yo-Yo Ma has been playing the cello for more than 60 years, during which time he's recorded more than 90 albums and won 19 Grammy Awards. His life as a musician has been defined by deep curiosity, a desire to understand why we created music, how music fits into culture more broadly, and why culture matters so much to society. He's explored these questions through decades of collaborations across sectors and genres, including creating Silk Road, an organization that brings together musicians from across cultural differences, and he's also the first artist to serve on the Forum's Board of Trustees. In August 2018, he embarked on a new experiment, the Bach project, performing Bach's 6 suites in a single sitting in 36 locations around the world. He's done it from the demilitarized zone to the US-Mexico border, from Mumbai to Medellin, from Beirut to Dakar. And he pairs these performances with days of actions, which are community activities. They're intended to show that culture seeks truth, builds trust, and encourages all to work at the service of one another. During this week in Davos, he'll be performing each of these 6 suites at different moments in different locations. On Thursday, it'll be in St. Johann, a church, and we'd like to welcome him because today he is performing the very first suite here for the people of Davos. Yo-Yo Ma.
Good evening, everybody. Does everybody speak English? I can speak French. My German is horrible. English is okay? All right, okay. So I feel like either a high school student or a high school teacher, since we're in a high school, and I'm about to give a report. But I'm also here, obviously, as a cellist, but also a board member at the World Economic Forum. And you could ask, what is a cellist doing as a board member? And I feel my purpose to join the forum is to actually play a part in wishing and hoping that culture, as in the arts and sciences, become one of the aspects that the leaders of the world will consider before they make any decision. I think that in the arts and sciences, I agree with you. You're right. That's exactly what I was thinking, but you said it better than I did. So I was thinking, as the young lady was saying, I agree, no, it's okay. She can say anything she wants. But I was actually thinking that in our world, we need scouts. Scouts who can be at the edges of society to look at what's happening. If you're a scientist, you're an environmentalist, you're an artist, you have different antennae. And we need to be able to have those people and the center of our societies speak to one another. Therefore, I think culture is there to build bridges, those types of bridges, and not walls. And I'm going to play for you a suite of music that's written over 300 years ago, no, just about 300 years ago, and that actually, because of all the dances that Bach wrote, from German to French to Italian, to the heart of a suite that comes from a Spanish dance that actually came from Northern Africa, that went to South America, went to France, came to Spain, was banished, and then went to France. And Bach used that in the saraband as the heart of a suite. Think of that. The furthest became the nearest and dearest. That's what culture does. It turns the other into us. So if we have to deal with these problems, I believe so strongly, and I will push as hard and talk to as many people that are willing to listen to me, that this is one frame of thinking that we need to include in all of our conversations, the values of which are based on three things: trust, truth, and service. Everything we invented, that we built on, depends on those three values being active. There's no discipline. There's nothing, including economics and politics, where that is not absolutely crucial, because then we could do everything. So now here is the Bach that I hope you will like, and I'll say one word about Bach, and it is that I think the reason I'm playing Bach is that I feel this man is speaking to me as someone who understands everything and is empathetic to all, whatever we feel, but is also an objective person. So kind of like a scientist composer. And what's interesting about Bach is that he never puts himself at the center of his narrative. Imagine that. So here's Bach.
Thank you so much. Please have a seat.
4.5, 4.6, 7.3, 1.0, 9.3. Those scores are all over the place.
I would give that an 11.
Well, you know,
Sure.
one thing I love about music is that it's not a competition for metrics. Right? This is not a competition. It's great if you are in a competition, people do grade you well. But this is what I think, there are things that we do and that we think and that we feel that are kind of less measurable. That doesn't mean that you can't measure them, but we haven't bothered or we haven't developed the capability to measure those things that we might have just experienced.
Should we measure them?
Well, the thing is, everything today in our world is subject to metrics. But, so I'm not saying whether we should or not, but usually when people want something done, you have to first measure it. The problem is, do we know how to measure something like that? Do we have the capacity to do that? And if we don't know something, does it mean that it doesn't mean anything?
Indeed.
So that's a question I have to ask all of us. And so, what do you think? I mean, you are here doing sustainable work, right?
Yes, I am.
Do they have a mic where I can
I
actually
thought I was
hold-
supposed to interview
'cause-
you. What's going on here?
No, but can they bring me back the mic? Because,
Sure.
I mean, I love talking like this, but actually I have scoliosis, which actually goes the other way. So I feel like
get you a hand
either
mic.
you're fixing my back or you're giving me another twist. Thank you. Thank you. Ah, I
much
feel so
better.
much better. Hello, everybody. Okay.
Yo-Yo Ma, I was looking at the faces of the people, and I mean, I just saw the emotion. I saw the joy that you were bringing to this room. Thank you. Musician, humanitarian, and some might even say activist. Now, we had a little chat in the back, and you were saying that you were delayed just a little bit on your way here due to the climate marchers.
Yes, and it was great because, you know, we missed 2 meetings. That I regret. But other than that, Jessica, who's with me, we were not mad at all. And we passed by the side of a mountain, and she pointed out to me there was, people had managed to carve out in the snow, "No Planet B." I thought, wow, that's amazing. They came in and did that. And so what you might not know is Greta's mother, I know her because she's a fabulous singer. She's an opera singer, and we actually did a Halloween concert about 25 years ago in Baltimore, and we rented costumes. She was Elvira, and I was D'Artagnan, and the conductor, David Zinman, was the devil. So we distributed candy from the back of this hall just before the concert, and it was one of the finest moments of my entire life. But Malena is a great singer, and she has a wonderful career, but Greta has now convinced her not to fly. So she only now will travel to Europe and sing. And so now I'm now worried about my carbon footprint, because this is something, I fly a lot for a living. And so our office is actually going to figure out what our carbon footprint is, what it would take to offset it, and we're gonna go through all that to try and figure it out, because I guess it's all of our business. I was so happy to see there were no plastic bottles, and you had, but I try and not use plastic bottles. Sometimes I forget, or I go into a store, there's nothing but plastic bottles. So that's something that, you know, I worry about. And people have told me good things that they did, like putting more garbage, like having fewer garbage cans in a house, so that if you have just one place where we put stuff, you put less stuff in.
You think twice.
Yeah.
You think twice
So
before
I
you
mean,
do.
there are all kinds of funny ways that I now turn off the lights, you know, in my rooms and my, you know, the bathroom and the kitchen. Stuff you do, right? Probably nod or shake your head. Yes, nod, shake your head. Some of you, you know, I don't know. So I'd love to talk about some of these things because it does affect what we do in the humanity that we pass on as we talk to one another or play for one another.
Indeed. So my question to you then is you weren't mad. These young people, they stopped you from coming here. You were stuck in traffic for 4 hours. How do you feel about these young movers and shakers and these young people that are mobilizing, the Gretas and Autumn Peltier? And we have a group of young change makers in Davos this year.
I love them.
You're optimistic for the future?
Well, okay, so I have children who are millennials who tell me that they're really mad at us, you know, the baby boomers, because we kind of ruined their world for them. My kids are not really mad at me, but they're just reporting that this is happening. They're mad at me for other things.
For other things.
But we're not going to talk about that tonight. That's for tomorrow night. Come to the second suite, I'll tell you everything that they... but my goodness, they succeeded in getting schools to allow them to go and march and demonstrate. That would not have happened 10, 20 years ago. I also know that young people have been doing this for years.
Yes.
So, and due credit should be given to them for thinking about it. I also think that people who are, you know, who are adolescents or teenagers are really all struggling to figure out what life is about, who they are, because everything, you know, their shoes are changing on a monthly basis, as well as their clothes. So everything's changing.
Yeah.
And what world are they inhabiting? I also think that many of us are open very few moments in our lives, like wide open to receive what's there, because we all have to get on with our lives. And it's very hard to produce life, right? So do I think it's great that they're doing that? Yes, because they have the energy and they have the idealism, but I have one caveat that I would like to raise here at Davos this year, because
This is the platform.
this is the platform. Because one of the things I think, so Davos is, or the WEF is, you know, you read the papers, it's the global elite, it's the Davos man, 22% women representation. And what are we doing? Well, the global elite actually, they know a lot of things. And I think the youngest people, the younger generation, Generation Z, Gen Z, actually are very conscious of the world. They want to do good things. They care about their families and community, less about global enterprise, because they need to trust from whom they buy, right? So
Indeed.
buying clothing from socially responsible places makes them feel sort of right.
Do you think their demand is going to impact more change?
Absolutely, it is already. And I think the other thing is that, but if people in, let's say, the older people who have done a lot of things, reach out and say, and to those that want to actually work with the old folks, we can actually accelerate this whole process, because 30 years is too long. We don't have that time. So if we reach out and actually say, hey, I do this, does anybody want to talk to me for the next year, let's call each other once a month, and what do people do when you mentor somebody that you have good chemistry with? You tell them what's important to you. You give them advice. You ask them to meet people, and I know I certainly have been helped as a young person by someone who believed in me. Say, I believe in you. What? You believe me? What do you know about me? I don't know myself. But if someone reaches out and says, I know you, and there's a good chemistry, that means a lot. And the WEF has, I think, something like 15,000 global shapers, or 8,000 young global shapers.
Around 10,000, yeah.
10,000, of which I have now met quite a number traveling around the world. And they're extraordinary people. They're doing great things. How about let them in on what else a 60-year-old's thinking about and worried about and dealing with, and what do they know? I think that would be amazing. So my personal mission is to actually try to get that going. There are 27 board members. I would love to actually talk to board members and say, are you interested in doing anything like that? And if someone says, yeah, maybe I can take one person or whatever, or you could take 10 people.
That'd be fantastic.
And I think this will make a difference, and that's what the WEF does great. It has the resources, it has the knowledge, and let's just spread it.
Thank you. I think what we'll do now is we'll open up to the audience a little bit. I'm sure they have some questions that they would like to ask you. Please, go ahead. We have mics on the side, so anything you would like to ask Yo-Yo, this is your chance. Gentleman on the side.
Sir.
Wait for the microphone, please.
Throw it at you.
You might want to put the thing if he's speaking German. Will this be in German or English?
No, English. When you were introducing the piece, you said that Bach didn't ever put himself at the center of his work. That struck me as very interesting and kind of weirdly right. But can you expand on that a bit? How can you tell from his music that was his approach?
Well, I can point to sort of the only period that he didn't work for the church was around 1720, 22, right about 300 years ago. And he worked for a person who loved music and had a lot of wonderful musicians around him. I would make the claim that the Brandenburg concertos, the 6 of them, the violin partitas and sonatas, the 6 of them together, the cello suites, were experiments on instruments. That's the reason I call him a scientist, is that I suspect Bach said to himself, there's a wonderful cellist, I'm going to find out what all the things the cello can do. And Bach played a lot of instruments. And so the first 3 suites, if I play them and think about them, he explores the cello, and by the end of the first 3 suites, I think he says, okay, I now know everything the cello can do. But he likes to work in 6s, hence all of those works that have 6 of them in as one sort of set. And so he says, I imagine he says to himself, but just because I know what the cello can do, I'm not sure the cello can do what I might want it to do. And I'm going to now try to see whether I can make the cello do things it can't do, but I might wish for it to do. Now, that's a tall order because Bach played the organ, which meant that he had 2 hands, he could play, both sets of keys, and he had his feet that you could put. So he could play a lot of notes at the same time. The cello can't. So it can't actually play many voices. So Bach says, but I like to compose in a lot of voices. So how can I actually get it to do something that's impossible? And I think the idea came to him one day. He says, what are unused assets? The listener, you. You have ears, and if you used your ears, and actually I played a low note, and I can't hold it for long, but it stays in your ear, so when I pick it up 5 seconds later and get to the next note, you are actually taking in another line that I'm composing. That's an amazing thing to overcome. I think he started doing more and more of that, starting the fourth suite. The fifth one, he started to get frustrated. He tuned the high stringed lower and was able to create a completely different sound. I don't do that, but those who do actually get that experience. And by the sixth suite, he's saying, you know, I am frustrated by the cello, but there was a five-stringed instrument called the viola pomposa, which he actually wrote the sixth suite for, which is far more complex in asking the instrument to do what he wanted to do. And if you listen to the sixth one, you will hear, and if you compare it to the first one, you will hear the changes. And I think that's what he was trying to do. And at the end, he's not saying, haha, I'm great. He just did the experiment, it's over. He went on to other things. Does that answer your question? Sort of a roundabout way to answer your question, but I tried.
Any more questions from the audience? Yeah.
Yes, in English. I think of Paganini as a composer that has done the same thing with the violin, but not so eloquently. I also think of Medici, who founded and funded the Renaissance in Italy. I'm trying to explain that to a country which will only fund sports and trying to get them to fund arts. What prompted you to undertake this endeavor, and how do you make that discussion or make it clear to people who are thinking in such a different realm? Thank you.
Well, I think one of the things that unites all people is that we actually are capable of using the imagination that we're given. But we need to practice it in order to really, and exercise it in order for that to grow. I think anybody that uses their imagination and delves into and is curious about their environment, their world, the world around them, becomes a creative person. You know, you don't have to be an artist to be creative. You don't have to be an artist to be vastly imaginative. People can read books and get into so many different worlds. And there are so many different frames of thinking. And the more different frames of thinking that we know and have access to, the closer we can actually get to what truth might be. And in these days, we really need that, I think. But we are also living at a time, unlike the Renaissance, we still have the term, so-and-so is a Renaissance person, right? What does that mean? They know a lot of things, and they can think a lot of different ways. Well, we're sort of living in an age of specialization, and we probably need to do both. We need to be specialists and generalists, because you could be such a specialist that nobody ends up understanding what you're a specialist in. And that's too bad, because you may have the depth, but actually we also at the same time need to develop the breadth. Does that make sense?
I think we have time for one more question. Maybe the lady in front of the lady that just asked the question.
Okay.
Right there. You can just hand it.
Just a second.
So
It's
she gets
coming.
a mic, then you get to ask the question, and then you can ask the question.
Hi.
And then you go home.
I
He's
in
gonna need more
English.
questions.
So I was really touched by your trust truth and service. And I wanted to ask a question. What does truth? Do you think there is only one truth, or do you think there are two truths based on your culture or differences? And if so, how do you bridge the gap between the two? That's my first question. And the second question is quick. If you were stranded on an island somewhere, you can only bring one thing, what would you bring?
Wine. But the answer to your first question, and I'll answer very quickly, which is I believe in prismatic truth. In other words, if you have we need 360 roundabout to look at something from many perspectives. And the more perspectives we have and that we respect them, we actually can get closer to the truth. If you look at the world from the northern hemisphere, the sky looks completely different than if you look from the southern hemisphere. You actually need both. You can't be three blind people trying to figure out what an elephant is, right? You have to actually, you need the three people to talk to one another in order, between the three of them, to figure out what might be what they're touching. Make sense? Okay, your question. The lady, this lady, right there, and then this lady. Bye. It was nice to play for you. This gentleman was really lovely because I was playing, looking at him, and he was like absolutely responding. My grandson, two and a half year old grandson, could not have done better because I think the music, you reacted to it physically, and that was beautiful. So thank you very much. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much for playing. It was wonderful. I'm Sakshi Talwar. My question is, you talked about how the younger generation is making the right choices by choosing more sustainable products. So what are the best ways, according to you, to accelerate this mental shift in the coming years, especially in today's times of immense consumerism by corporates and global giants?
This is a big question. I'll try and give you a 30-second answer.
Okay.
I think humans recognizing one another is that cultural act of connecting is something we actually need to survive. It's, I think, a human right to have that because that's what advances our knowledge. We all need help. And I've worked with, for example, MIT has something called Solve, and they kind of blast out questions and people come up with lots of solutions on how to think of something. And
Right.
they make up these plans, they have a competition coming from all over the world, and then these people get mentored over like a year. And I did some of that with a number of groups. So I can sort of see how that progresses. Sometimes it works better than others.
Right.
But I think having someone listen carefully and intelligently gives you a perspective on your own work. I mean, as a musician, I need constant feedback in order to know, do your ears, what kind of information are your ears receiving? Are they the same as I'm trying to produce? And that's, if it matches and it lives within you, then my work is done. Just the fact that you're in the seat is not the end of, it's,
Right.
you're not a consumer and then that's it.
Yeah.
It goes beyond that. It has to live within you in order for my work to be complete. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Going in the roundabout way. Just for your information, we will be having a session on disposable society this week as well, so that might be of interest to you.
Thank you so much for your wonderful performance, and thank you for the message that human values are at the heart of culture and that culture therefore should be at the heart of politics. My question is in a similar vein to the lady back here. How do we get our politicians to recognise this? So I have a confession to make. I'm Australian. It's a confession because these days I'm more and more ashamed to be Australian. Did you know that Australia no longer has a Department for Arts and Culture? The Department for Arts was axed and rolled into the Department for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development, and I don't see where in that is the room for culture and human values. So what can we do to get our politicians to recognise the message that you're putting across?
Well, I think I could say something incredibly snarky, like, you know, don't take vacations when your country's burning, but I'm not going to say that. And as a God-fearing person, that maybe, you know, humans do have a right to be able to express themselves in as many forms as possible. But I'm not going to say any of those things, but I'm just going to say I think I read that there's an arts party in Australia. Just FYI. And those are the first steps for people to actually go into another realm and say, we're getting together. They may or may not be successful, but I actually am on their mailing list because I'm interested in what's happening in Australia. And I'm so sorry for what's happening there. It's beyond horrible, but we should pay attention to that. But to answer your question about politicians are human beings. They also are educated as human beings. And I think this is where, you know, we need different ways of thinking in order for any person to become a good, constructive member of society and citizen, right? So I think, you know, in the United States, people have this thing called STEM to STEAM, you know, science, technology, engineering, math to STEAM, adding the arts and whatever. So I think there's a movement for that, just because I think there's a children's television talk show host, Mr. Rogers, who used to say to children, very young children, that you're beautiful on the outside and you're beautiful on the inside. I think the arts actually delve into our insides and can show that beauty. That's the part that's really hard to measure, but we can sense each other's inner lives. Whether you have an inner life, everybody has an inner life. It's whether you have access to it, whether you let yourself have access to it. Because when you let yourself have access to it in your daily decisions, you end up making better decisions. So politicians make a lot of decisions. So I think for them to make better decisions, I'd say that should be another frame of thinking, that they should process all of the material that they deal with through.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Yo-Yo Ma. It is a privilege to have had you here. It is a privilege as a musician, humanitarian, building bridges with the rest of the world with your music. It is a privilege to have you on the board of trustees
So
of
many
the World.
privileges.
It is. It's a true privilege to have you
I feel
here.
I need an American Express card.
We are all privileged to have you here today. Thank you so very much. Yo-Yo Ma. Thanks a lot.